Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for turning out tonight. I'm Daniel Benjamin. I'm the president of the American Academy in Berlin, and we're thrilled to be having this event on America at 250. And we'll be joined tonight by Wolfgang Krach and Andrian Kreye from the Süddeutsche Zeitung, and Jeff Goldberg and George Packer from The Atlantic. So 250 is, as American politicians like to say, a really big deal. It's a big deal. It's a big deal. It's a moment for extended, perhaps celebration, but even more at this particular point for some reflection, since obviously things are a little more challenging at the moment than we had anticipated. I'm thrilled, first of all, that the American Academy is visiting Munich. We come here from time to time, but we've never had an audience like this, and this is really gratifying. So thank you for coming. Come visit us in Berlin. Might be a little more intimate. And I also just want to say how excited we are that this is the beginning of a week-long series of events together with The Atlantic. And this is our very first ever collaboration with the Süddeutsche Zeitung, and that is just a fabulous thing for us. It's a paper I have admired for 30 years, and I'm really thrilled that we can do this. Let me also just say that we want to give a really big thank you to this fabulous Residence Theater in Munich, which is just a jewel, and it's thrilling to be here. So we're totally thrilled and honored that the theater is ausgebucht. That there are several hundred people who didn't get in and are watching us on live stream, and we're really pleased that you wanted to join us tonight. So let me just say a few words about the coming week. Over the next week, we will bring together leading journalists, thinkers, and policymakers from both sides of the ocean for which the magazine is named, and we will be holding a series of conversations in Berlin and Munich. We will be having 3 sold-out public events on this scale, more or less, and a whole bunch of smaller private discussions in Berlin. And together we're going to be taking on some of the most difficult issues of the era, from technology, culture, the shifting global economy, and above all, the rise of autocracy. This is timed to the year-long celebration of the 250th anniversary of the U.S. Declaration of Independence, a document as meaningful to world history as just about any. And we think that this is a good moment to start the process of reflection, debate, evaluation, and we hope some fresh thinking at a moment of profound global churn and transformation. This week's events are inspired by The Atlantic's 250th anniversary issue, or its issue on the 250th anniversary of the United States. Got a great cover. It will be coming to websites and newsstands near you soon. It's got a fantastic fold-out thing. Usually centerfolds are in a different kind of publication, but never mind that. And I highly recommend it. It's got so many fantastic articles in it. I think it's going to be the kind of thing that people will want to read carefully and hold on to and go back and read again. So I do hope you can get it soon, and I hope you enjoy it. So before we start the discussion, let me briefly introduce our speakers tonight. And when I'm done introducing them all, they will come out. Wolfgang Krach is the editor-in-chief of the Süddeutsche Zeitung. I'm guessing that people in Munich know him well. Prior to joining the SZ, he worked for the German politics section of Stern, and then he was head of the Germany desk at Spiegel. He first joined the Süddeutsche Zeitung in 2003 as managing editor and head of the news desk. He was then appointed to the editorial board as deputy editor-in-chief, and since 2015, he has been editor-in-chief, serving jointly with Judith Witwer since 2020. Andrian Kreye, who's over here, is editor-at-large of the Süddeutsche. Prior to joining the newspaper, he co-founded the magazine Tempo, and he knows America well, having several years of experience working as a journalist in New York. He has received a wonderful basket of awards, including the Theodor Wolff Prize, the German Jazz Prize, and the George F. Kennan Award for German-American commentary. One wonders sometimes what George Kennan would think of being in that company, but he is also the author of several books. Jeffrey Goldberg. Jeffrey Goldberg's outstanding achievement is that he was a fellow at the American Academy in Berlin. That was back in 2015, and for the past few years, he's been a tremendously valued trustee on our board. And by the way, he is the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic. And under his leadership, the magazine has won its first 3 Pulitzer Prizes in history, as well as the National Magazine Award for General Excellence for the past 3 years in a row. He is also the moderator of a show many of you may have seen. I didn't realize so many people in Munich had seen it until 2 people complimented him on it at breakfast, Washington Week with The Atlantic on public broadcasting. And finally, George Packer is also an alum of the Academy, a 2-time fellow, which makes him one of 2 of those. He is a staff writer at The Atlantic, and he is known for his deep explorations of American politics, culture, and foreign affairs. Before joining The Atlantic in 2018, he was a staff writer at The New Yorker for 15 years. He is the author of 10 books. He is someone who is very close to the heart of the American Academy because he wrote the definitive biography of Richard Holbrooke, which I recommend to all of you. And I also recommend to you The Unwinding, which is one of the absolutely vital texts about what happened to America in the last 25 years. So with that, we'll get started. They all came out a little earlier than I was expecting. I'm a little off kilter right now. Let me just say we're going to talk for about an hour. We have questions that have already been submitted in advance, so you won't have to deal with that crazy thing about moving around the mic. Wolfgang, let's start with you.
Okay.
Tell us a bit about this partnership that the Süddeutsche and the Atlantic have started, where did it come from, and why now? And then we'll talk about America after that.
I think you can understand why we started the cooperation without what happened on the 5th of November last year, without the election of Donald Trump. Why? We saw after the election of Donald Trump, and after he got the 47th president on the 20th of January, and huge interest of our readers to be informed about what's going on in the United States, because it was so, I think, so unbelievable for many of us, for most of us, me included. And we published so many stories every day, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 stories by our own correspondents. We have 5 based in the US. And we saw a huge hunger for news, a huge hunger for analysis and for explanation. And we couldn't get the people to be not any more hungry anymore. So what we thought is it might be a good idea to take also the American view into our coverage. And so we started the cooperation with The Atlantic in April, 6 months ago. And we publish 5 pieces every week of The Atlantic. And we have to say that the success is really great. We see such a huge interest. With the 5 stories we publish every week are read from our subscribers on average by 50,000 readers, and this is really a huge number of people. So we are very happy with the cooperation because we publish the pieces in English in the original language, and the people read them in English. And what we see, the issues that are interesting our readership is Trump, J.D. Vance, the Obamas, a bit Taylor Swift, and other celebrities. But there is really a deep interest in trying to understand what's going on in this wonderful country.
I'm glad you're not pursuing celebrity journalism there. I should add, by the way, that we have a fantastic panel here tonight, and it's just a sad fact of history that we're all middle-aged males wearing blue suits, and it's completely coincidental.
But we have diversity because
You're wearing a tie.
I'm wearing a tie
And
George's wearing glasses.
Yeah.
Yes. I got to say, I'm looking at 700 or 800 people who've all come out on a Monday night to hear about the politics
Donald
of a
Trump.
foreign country in a foreign language.
Yeah, I'm taking a picture of this audience. That was kind of incredible.
This would not happen in my country.
Yeah.
It
Amazing. It would. It would happen in our country. What wouldn't happen in our country, and I'm sad to say this, is that 800 Americans would not come out to hear a discussion about the Chancellor of Germany.
yeah,
And I actually,
in German.
in German,
So
I mean, you couldn't get
congratulations.
800 at the German embassy to talk about that.
Congratulations to the German people for your interest in the United States. I hope it is not ill-requited. I hope we give you something back, but it's an amazing thing to see you all here.
Yeah, I'd feel better if I thought you were just here out of general interest and not a sense of thinly veiled panic. But
Or I once asked a German reporter, why do you think this book of mine about American decline is popular in Germany? He said, do you know this German word Schadenfreude? Maybe that's why you're here.
yeah, let's
I don't think so.
let's not go there. Okay, Wolfgang. By my guess, you have spent your entire life as the citizen of a country that was one of the United States' closest allies, and one that the United States exerted an unusual amount of influence over culturally and politically. How are you feeling about where we are on as we approach the 250th, as someone who has been reading news about the whole world intensively, ordering up news about the whole world intensively for quite a long time? And I think it'll be helpful for us to start from that, if not a Archimedean point in the universe, at least a really important point here in Munich. What are you seeing and how are you feeling about events? And can you share some confidence with us that we have not yet found?
Well, I have to admit that I'm still in a status of shock since January, and I think this is also a feeling that many people here in Germany have. I was in the United States the first time 33 years ago in 1992. By the way, together with a guy who is quite famous and also important today, Viktor Orban. I was traveling with him to the United States.
Wait.
Yeah, no, later.
What?
Yeah. Later. So, and this was in 92. And I was at the Democratic Convention in New York's Madison Square Garden, where Bill Clinton was nominated as the presidential candidate. And what I was seeing was so impressive for me. It was the first political event that I ever attended. It was so impressive. You could see him deliver his speech and his running mate, Al Gore. And he was trying to reconciliate the audience and also the country. And he was delivering a speech that really impressed me. And I was impressed by this really great democratic convention in both in the double sense. And I was impressed when we travel around the country to see how diverse this country was, how much integration had been taken place, how this melting pot was working. And so the United States, for me personally, evolved as a role model for democracy. And now, when I see what happened in the last few months, that's the reason why I'm so shocked. Because the country that, in my perception, was the role model for democracy, elected a president that started to destroy this democracy within a few months. He's starting to destroy the separation of power. He's starting to destroy the freedom of the press, and I'm shocked a bit about how little resistance we can see from here to this change into an authoritarian regime. But also there is some hope in me. That's when I saw the No King demonstrations a few weeks ago with 7 million people, I thought, okay, America is not lost.
I'm going to move on. Jeff, how do you feel about that perspective from someone with whom you probably share an awful lot of values, but are separated by 4,000 miles? How do you feel to be looked at that way?
I still want to find out this Viktor Orban business.
Yeah.
What did you say to him? Something went wrong there. Was it some sort of tour?
Just say something.
He was a lot thinner then too.
Was it like a democracy tour?
He was a young, smart, intelligent guy. We were
a writer then, or like a
we were there as fellows of the German Marshall Fund. And at that time, I was a potential young European leader. It was a mistake to choose me, I know. It was not a mistake to choose Viktor Orban. And we were 11 people from Europe, and he was sitting, I think the first day when we introduced each other, he was sitting left from me on my side, like you are now sitting here. And he introduced himself. I still remember exactly what he said. My name is Viktor Orban. I am the leader of Fidesz in Hungary, and I'll be the next prime minister in Hungary. This was 1992, and he was a very young guy. And at that time, I thought, what a guy. He wants to tell us that he will be the next prime minister of Hungary. This guy must be a megalomaniac. But 6 years later, he was the prime minister of Hungary. And he was, I mean, you have to rethink at that time, he was a hero in Hungary because he was the leader against Soviet occupation. I mean, he was a leader, he stood up against the communists. And so he was the leader of a liberal, democratic, young party.
Right. Well, at least that explains something bad happened at that Democratic National Convention to Viktor Orban. Obviously, he didn't enjoy it the same way. But Dan, your question was, do I agree that all hope is not lost? Or
how do you feel about the picture that Wolfgang has drawn as someone at ground zero in Washington?
I don't have the same faith that he has. I don't think about this No Kings demonstrations as much maybe as I should. There's 340 million people in America, 7 million likely suspects went out and protested. I'm always surprised that, I put it this way, I thought if Trump, on the off chance, that's what I thought a year ago this time, if Trump were to win, I assumed that, in my naivete, I thought that the White House would be surrounded by demonstrators perpetually. That the American people, particularly in the Washington D.C. area, which is very heavily Democratic Party, not a particularly red zone of America, would just simply surround it, thousands and thousands of people, and wouldn't let the business of government take place until but everybody sort of said, well, I guess Trump won again. Here we are. You for whatever reason, Trump has not run up against the issue that activates masses of Americans to come out and protest. I don't know if there is an issue that would activate masses of Americans in protest anymore. We were talking about this earlier. When people have food, clothing, and shelter, and they have electricity and hot water, and the roads work and the traffic lights work, I don't know, maybe you can't activate people toward this, or you live in a splintered reality of social media and AI and all the rest, and the bubbles that everyone lives in now. Maybe you can't. Maybe everyone's reality is so different that it doesn't matter what I see as reality. What matters is what 60% or 50% of the country see as reality. I don't know, but I would certainly say that we're in a situation right now where the independent, merit-based functions of government are being destroyed, meaning the Justice Department, the FBI. Science is being dismantled. In other words, empirical science is being dismantled in favor of voodoo and about vaccines and everything else. The judiciary, the judges are holding on. But across government, you have the politicization of this is a very important issue in Germany, obviously, where you have tens of thousands of American soldiers stationed here. We've always prided ourselves on an apolitical military, as do you now. And there are people who are trying to politicize the military, obviously, the Secretary of Defense and the president. We're in a lot of trouble, and I don't know if a democracy can survive 3 more years of this. I'm not saying that that's the end of America. It's just the end of America as we understand it. The media we still say what we want to say. A lot of people censor themselves in anticipation of punishment. The owners of publications, the owners of TV stations are under a lot of pressure to conform in a way that we've never seen in modern American history. Orwell has a line that I always think of. It's like some things it's very, very hard to see what's right in front of your nose. My observation is that the changes that we're experiencing are so big that they're impossible cognitively to understand. We always thought that stability was our strength. Democrats come in and they change this. Republicans come in and they change that. But just to use one example, I hope we talk about. I'll end here. One example that I hope we talk about tonight. Since 1945, there's been a consensus in America at both parties, left to right, that we are going to come to the defense of Europe against Russian or other aggression, Soviet and then Russian aggression, because we share values with the countries of Western Europe, including and especially Germany, and that we are joined not only by self-interest but by shared set of values. And we've had this, and it's been good for Germany. It's been good for the United States for 80 years. And we could see this, to borrow a word, we could see this unwinding in the next few years. That's shocking. It's something that's worked so well that people forgot why we did it in the first place. And then we'll find out the hard way why we did it when it no longer exists. So I have nothing good to say.
I'll give you another chance later.
No, I'm not. I have nothing. I don't see. I don't see the way out quite yet.
Andrian, you lived in New York, and so you are not the classic European who comes back after a 2-week vacation and tells his American friends living in Europe, what's wrong in that country. You actually have spent time there. And if you wanted to put your finger on it, and by the way, we Americans are richly guilty of doing the same thing in the other direction. What is it that stands out to you as being behind the American crisis?
It's been a long time coming. And I think we refuse to see that certain niches that were brewing up, kind of the storm above the prairie, that we wouldn't look to that. And mostly, if you live in a metropolitan bubble, you tend to look at metropolitan culture, metropolitan politics, and metropolitan life. And there was something brewing that a lot of Europeans missed, because the so-called flyover states are rarely visited by foreigners or tourists or even reporters. We do make an effort, and we always tend to look for the better in America, because for so many decades, it was a beacon. It was always a beacon, both of democracy and culture for us. And so it was always hard to see that there's such a decline even possible. And especially, like, if you grew up in Munich, which was a big garrison town, if you're like my age, America is not a foreign country. America is a country that we partially grew up in. So we grew up with American radio. We grew up with American food. We grew up with American music. I would, like, when I was a teenager, I would play with GIs in a band, and they would serve pig feet and chitlin in the intermissions. And so we got to kind of get a taste of America, and it was like pure soft power. And that's probably what we turn to even now, to try to figure out that, like, this is the country we still love, but so much is lost. But I do think that we kind of are flabbergasted on a minute by minute basis what happened in the past month, and also what happened in the first administration. And it's kind of unfathomable that it's kind of, for a lot of Germans, it's emotional. It's unfathomable that we not only lost that beacon, but that partner across the ocean. And so it's a state of shock.
So as you think about that loss, do you think of it as it's a tough question, a temporary loss or permanent loss?
That is a very good question. I would love to see it as a temporary loss.
Yeah.
And then, I was there in the springtime, and I kind of got mixed in with the resistance or protest movement, and there was like a great climate march that was designed for 10,000 people, and all of a sudden it was 80,000 people, but it was only 80,000 people on the streets of New York. But when you're in the middle of it, it feels like this rush, and you have like this emotion of like this upsurge, and then you go to this after party, and then there's Soran Mamdani who shows up, who's so incredibly charismatic, and like he's more like, I think, a European dream. He might be, for a lot of Americans, he might be a nightmare, even if you sympathize with his politics, because he, as you mentioned, he might do some damage to the Democrats. That's not quite clear yet how much damage he does. But so yeah, we cling to this idea that this is temporary, but on the other hand, a renewal, how much damage is done? How long would it take for a renewal to like turn America into the America we knew and loved?
George, first of all, I want to make a plug for my friend George. He has a new novel out, The Emergency. It's in fact, it's not even out. I feel so special to have a copy, and it'll be out on the 10th or the 11th. The 11th. So if it's halfway as good as his other writings, you'll want to go support Global Oligarchy and go to Amazon and order it. Anyway, George, you also wrote this great piece in the magazine issue about what it is Americans need most at the moment, and I was wondering if you would clue us in a bit.
Well, I'm thinking about 1992 because, yes, that was almost the zenith of liberal democracy, liberal capitalism, the Pax Americana. It was going to continue throughout most of that decade. But there were things already going on in the United States that seemed like fringe events, like the militia movement and the shootouts at Waco and Ruby Ridge, when heavily armed anti-government, either religiously motivated or politically motivated people fought it out with the feds, the federal government. Pat Buchanan came on the scene as a leader of a kind of conservatism that had been sort of muted for a long time, but basically nativist, xenophobic, anti-Semitic, and not libertarian. It was un-Reagan-like, and he didn't win the primaries that he entered, and he sort of passed on to history, wrote some books about why we should never have fought World War II. And suddenly these ideas that were the ideas of lunatics and cranks are at the center of government 30 some years later. You could say when J.D. Vance says, we are not a creedal country, meaning the words of the Declaration, all men are created equal, are not what make us Americans. What makes us Americans is essentially how many generations of corpses are lying in our family cemetery, how far back we go. And there's a kind of a suggestion that really to be an American, you have to be a white Christian to go back that far. Everyone else is kind of under a bit of a cloud of suspicion. They have to prove their Americanness. This is blood and soil. This is a different nationalism from the civic nationalism of the Declaration, which has these universal principles and which I grew up thinking was the only American identity there was. There wasn't another one. Now there's a battle, and it does feel as if the nativists, the blood and soil nationalists, are winning. So it was there. I've written, I don't want to think about how many books and articles tracking the gradual alienation of Americans, especially in the heartland, from the centers of power, from the elites, from Wall Street, Washington, Silicon Valley. The reasons are many. They are not easily summarized, but I would ask you to think, we are becoming more European. We are moving away from a politics that was played rather narrowly between, as we would say in American football, the 40-yard lines of liberal democracy, some center right, some center left. And instead, we have socialists and we have fascists. So that's something Europeans should recognize. We have a heartland that is so deeply disillusioned that it seems prepared to vote for extremists who may not even have an answer for their problems. Don't you have that here in Germany? Doesn't France have it? Doesn't Britain have it? So it does. We're going to talk tonight about the United States, but for me, it is a transformation that is making us more like the rest of the world rather than unique. Our uniqueness, which some people called American exceptionalism, was the idea that we stood for these universal values. And the thing that's shocking to me, Wolfgang, is how little those values seem to have a hold on my fellow citizens right now. How abstract and even irrelevant things like the separation of powers and due process and the Constitution, the rule of law, have become, given the lack of a massive uprising of protest. I have to say, I've been to the No Kings rally the last time around. It was really moving. And they happened across the country. The important thing about No Kings is it's in every little town and in every state. It's not just a bunch of people coming to New York or Washington. It feels like an American movement. It's very patriotic. They're not waving the flags of Mexico or Palestine. They're waving the flags of the United States. One man's sign said, radicalized by basic decency. Mm-hmm. And to me, that was like, this is what it's about. Are we as Americans going to really accept the utter indecency of our rulers, the corruption, the power grabs, the language, the corrosion of our discourse? Yeah, only 7 million people cared enough this time around to come out into the streets, and I wish there had been more. But for me, that's the flame that I'm trying to keep from going out, because if you look across the institutions, whether it's law or universities or corporations or big media conglomerates, they've all folded one by one. The top people have folded. It's the average citizens who are on the streets of no kings. But the elites who have money and power and can afford to take a chance seem to have decided they don't want to lose what they've got. And that's yeah, it's very disappointing and shocking. It is shocking. But we can't, there's no determination in history. Nothing is predestined. And for me, what Americans have to do is see the threat for what it is, how dire it is, how we are slipping into authoritarianism, and refuse to accept it. And then their conscience might guide them about what action to take. But we don't know what action to take. We are in this state of paralysis or passivity because it's come at us so fast and so furiously. So it's certainly not over. A lot depends on next year's election, whether we even have it as a free and fair election, which is questionable.
It does seem like the Steve Bannon strategy of moving everywhere all the time and at its speed has indeed flattened the opposition, and that there has been an inability to figure out, well, where we pick our shots, what is it that's most important to do to stop this. You know, the NGOs, the organizations that are bringing lawsuits are doing that right and left without pause. But it seems like with Congress totally in the hands of a party that wants to just rubber stamp what Trump wants, and the Supreme Court, you know, in an uncertain position, that it is going to be public demonstration that is going to be required to make a difference. And of course, there's a question there. Is there going to be public demonstration, or are there going to be troops sent into all of these countries? And is he going into all these states? And is the president going to invoke the Insurrection Act?
Right. The guardrails, the institutional guardrails are really important, but they are never going to save you if public opinion isn't going to save you. And I don't know where public opinion is right now. And it may be.
We do know that he's
unpopular.
He has high disapproval ratings.
Yes.
And a lot has to do with the current government shutdown. I don't know if you're following that. But, you know, the majority of Americans, passively at least, don't like what's happening.
Right.
But you know, he has a very hot core.
And do they see it as an existential threat? Or are they upset because tariffs have raised prices, or because they see Congress not doing its job? And I worry that the existential threat is one we have never experienced, so it's hard to recognize it when it's bearing down on you, when it's staring you in the face, as Jeff said, right in front of your nose.
One of the big surprises to me, and this is for all of our panelists, but especially for the said journalists, one of the surprises to me was that there were actually such a large group of people prepared to carry out the policies of the Trump administration. I mean, there's a lot of question about this. How many people are there left at the Department of Justice? No one knows. You know, how many people are there left at the State Department? No one really knows. But the fact is, there are enough to keep all of this going. And, you know, I was wondering does this all give you unpleasant historical echoes as you see that there are, in fact, plenty of people. You know, I, too, as an American, thought, oh, well, we have things we all believe in, even if we, you know, don't agree on what tax rates should be. But it's shocking, actually, to see how effective this Trump administration has been in comparison with the last one, which couldn't get anything done.
I would like to say something about what George said. I mean, you asked the question, do enough people in the United States feel the existential threat to the democracy in this country. And this is exactly the question I also have. And what I'm thinking about all the last few months, we in Germany, we have this historical experience with the 12 years of the Nazi regime. We saw what it means, or it can mean, when democracy dies, when there is no more democracy in the country. And therefore, I think I spent a lot of time in my life to try to understand why this happened, how could this happen. And we are profiting, we are living in a country with a democracy. There are also threats, yes, I would say, and with a free press that is still quite strong. But the question is, we made this existential experience, and in the family of all the people who are sitting here, are victims of these 12 years. And I'm wondering whether enough people in the United States know what can happen. And I think you should not draw wrong parallels, historic parallels, but the whole militarization of daily life in the cities, for example, what we see with ICE now, with the National Guard now, it reminds me of the pictures we saw in the 1930s here in Germany. So I don't want to say that this is the outcome of Trump, but this is something that really, this fear goes very, very deep. I feel it in myself, whether this consciousness is there.
And if you look at 32 and 33, a lot of powerful people thought they could use the Nazis for their own purposes.
Yeah.
And a lot of powerful people were cowards and gave in. And a lot of people thought, it's not me, it's them that they're going after. I'll be fine. And we've seen all three of those things happening in the United States.
But you know, it's interesting, sitting here in Munich, listening to you, we, for a couple of reasons, are hesitant to make the equation that you're making. I'm not saying that the equation isn't just. All analogies are inexact by the nature of analogies. We're hesitant to is that the mic or something? No, that's fine. See, as soon as you start talking about it, they come after you. We're hesitant because Nazism is singular, you know, and these guys in America aren't Nazis, and yet the playbook is the playbook. The populist takeover playbook is the takeover, and you know, you talk about ICE. Now, I can tell you a number of reasons why that's not the same as the SS pulling Jews out of stores in 1933 in Munich. But I can also say, yeah, the pictures look like the pictures, you know, and it's not the enforcement of immigration law that we're seeing precisely. We're seeing a group of people based on their skin color being targeted. And so, I mean, I'm just having this reaction to listening to you say that. It's I wouldn't say liberating, but it's interesting because I think in America, particularly if you're Jewish, you don't want to go to that place and say, yeah, this what happened here can happen at home, but sometimes what we're seeing in the last months does make me think, oh, okay, this is a playbook that we've seen before, not just in Germany, but you know, the Nazi Party perfected that playbook, and it's a useful playbook. I mean, the truth is, we listened to, and we talked about this earlier. We listened to, I don't know how familiar the name Stephen Miller is to people here and following. Okay, so it's familiar. You know, and he's a central ideologue of the movement. And I listen to his speeches and I think, all right, that's a guy who has studied from the populist handbook. And then I'm struck by, all right, just calm down, saying to myself, because it could never be as bad in America as it was in Germany. But then you also realize, well, no one is immune to these particular temptations.
I didn't want to draw the parallel of the development. What I wanted to say is that we made an existential experience what happens when democracy dies,
Right.
and what are the signs for that. And in any of our families, we have fathers, grandfathers, grandmothers who made this experience, and therefore I'm very sensitive when I see that democratic institutions are damaged in this brutal way and in such a speed that's going on in the US.
But which is why Americans shouldn't be talking to Germans. Germans should be talking to Americans right now.
Well, we sort of are.
Also,
Because of
what matters is almost the psychology of each individual. We see the institutional game plan, but what really matters is how do you respond as an individual? And too many Germans responded by turning the other way, by thinking it could be useful to them, even by becoming fanatics because it was either a good career move or they were fanatics. And that's what worries me, is I just don't see individuals psychologically responding to this in any proportion to the threat. I see people tuned out. I see people making partisan excuses.
Jeff had something
It's
to
a
say.
really tribalized, polarized atmosphere.
Could I just tell you a short story, which I think tells you what you need to know about human nature? Unfortunately, so I used to be somewhat close to Lindsey Graham, senator from South Carolina. We used to come to Munich. Actually, we were a part of the gang that John McCain would bring to the Munich Security Conference every February or so, and he was a mainstream Republican, hawkish on defense, NATO, the usual. John McCain dies. Donald Trump becomes a new father figure in a kind of way, and he joins the Trump team. Now, John McCain hated to the day he died, and I saw him almost a few days before he died. Hated Donald Trump, everything that he stood for, personally, politically, morally. And I was with Lindsey, and then I sort of fell out with Lindsey Graham, but I was with him once a few years ago, and I asked him. I said, like, Lindsey, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? John McCain, the late great John McCain, would be embarrassed by what you've become, and he said, and this will always stay with me because it's brutally honest. He said, if there's anything you know about me, Jeff, it's that I love to be relevant. I need to be relevant. And the president of the United States, Donald Trump at the time, and again, calls him on the phone all the time. And so it was pure careerism, pure psychological need to have this figure that he was serving. And he changed his beliefs in order to do that. And I think that's what we're all surprised about, but maybe we're being naive.
I think that our audience is pretty well versed on what's going on in the U.S. But Jeff, one issue that I know you're pretty focused on hasn't fully been reported, I think, on this side of the ocean yet, and that is the bizarre growth of anti-Semitism in the Republican Party and in the MAGA ranks, and the weird way in which it is becoming a dividing line within the party.
I'm always asked which anti-Semitism is worse, the left-wing anti-Semitism, the right-wing anti-Semitism. I said, why do I have to choose? Can't I just take both?
Yeah.
It's like a menu option.
Yeah.
Each one is. I mean, first of all, anti-Semitism, I don't have to tell this audience, is a virus. It's a virus that's been alive for at least 2,000 years. It finds its host wherever it can find it, and it expresses itself in whatever socially acceptable way. When communism was unpopular, the Jews are capitalists. When capitalism was unpopular, the Jews are communist, and and on and on and on. The Jews killed Christ. The Jews invented Christ. You know the whole thing. What is interesting in the last 3 weeks, is that the most popular right-wing podcaster and public intellectual, if you want to call him that, Tucker Carlson, has fully embraced anti-Semitism now as a means for political and personal advancement, which suggests, I mean, he's a very opportunistic person. So when he has said, anti-Semitism, I'm going to make money off this, it really strikes me that he's reading the room, as we say. The left-wing anti-Semite, I mean, Zohran Mamdani, who's about to become the mayor of the most heavily Jewish populated city in the world, said 2 years ago, he said, I forgot the exact quote, but he basically said, if you're suffering from police violence at the hands of the New York City Police Department, remember that it's the IDF behind that, the Israeli Defense Forces. And it's like,
the New York Police Department are laced up
the
by
boots,
the
boots that are on your neck are laced by the Israeli Defense Force. And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said that the reason you don't have health care in America is because we spend so much money on Israel. It's like, that is anybody who studied this understands that's classic scapegoating. Obviously, it's whatever is ailing you and your society is the fault of the Jews. So you have this on the left, but the right is really growing in a way, and maybe again, naivete. I always thought that America was immune, for various reasons. America was immune to the virus in a way, but it might not be. You would be surprised, I think. This is pure anecdotal evidence, but you would be surprised at the number of Jewish people, friends of mine, who have said, you know what, we should try to get German citizenship. I had 3 people say to me in the last week when I said I was coming to Germany, they said, are you going to go apply for citizenship? And by the way, seems like a fine citizenship to have, but I always answer the negative, because it's like, that's America. We're gonna fight it out in America here. We're not running away. But it is interesting historically. Whatever. But it is interesting historically that Jewish Americans at this point are thinking that you can find very sensible Jewish identified people saying, you know what, Germany sounds safer for me than America. So that's where we're at.
That's where we're at.
That's where we're at right now.
Andrian, I have a question for you. The America's 250th is not just America's 250th. It will have reverberations, and it will affect countries around the world. And I am, as we watch all this, I want to bring it back to Germany and just ask, is the rise of the far right in America something that gives you pause about regarding the rise of the far right here? It was interesting that Elon Musk's campaigning for the AfD didn't make much of a difference, and neither, it seems, did Vice President Vance's. But I'm wondering if that will remain the case, or if this is something that makes Germans concerned.
Well, what's concerning is that you have an autocratic regime right now in America that uses new media very well, but these new media aren't national anymore. So that also speeds up this surprising velocity of developments, because it thrives on velocity, and it thrives on trespassing, and it thrives on the surprises of crass infringements on values. So the worrisome thing is for the rest of the world is that with these new media, currently social media, and soon to become like AI agents and AI bots, that they distribute values just as soft power media distributed values around the world. After it was much more much more pleasant, of course, to like watch movies and read books and go to exhibitions and have like the values a little bit more abstract. And now you have the digital culture and digital media that are basically spewing these new values. And J.D. Vance made it very clear, both here in Munich and in Paris, when he said that we don't share the same values anymore here in Europe with the United States. And so, yes, it does. It is worrisome. And you see it in the rise of right-wing movements all over the world. And I do think that it's not the only reason. I mean, there's so many reasons for the rise of anything, but it does work as an amplifier of what's happening right now around the world. And here in Germany as well, I'm afraid.
Yeah, George.
One question about Germany is, do you have this phenomenon that we have of just white hot partisan hatred, where if you are of the other party, anything you say is a lie, you are trying to destroy my country, I have to do everything, including outside the Constitution, to stop you? Because I think what makes us a bit distinct here is that is the identifier that drives people more than any other, is which side of that line are you on? Are you red? Are you blue? Are you Republican, Democrat? But as Jeff said earlier today, Republican doesn't really matter anymore. It's, are you MAGA? It's all about Trump. Or are you Democrat, which has been involved in a little intra-party civil war for the past few years. So that there is no common ground possible. There's no common reality possible. We don't agree on what's real. January 6th, 2021, for about 3 news cycles, produced fairly universal horror. And you could just feel it evaporating within about 2 days because partisanship took over. And Republicans in Congress began to start to make excuses. And eventually it became a hoax. Charlie Kirk thought it was a total hoax. It was just the FBI entrapping people, entrapping good patriotic Americans. How do you have a politics where that division, which I think is above all a division of the highly educated and the less educated? It's not so much racial anymore. There's a gender element, but I think the most powerful dividing line is, are you in a small town in the heartland where most people don't go to college, or do you live in a big city where college is, everybody's intended destination? And that those two Americas are in such a state of mutual hatred that Trump can do just as he said. I could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and my people wouldn't object because they hate the other side more than they would fault Trump for committing murder. I think it's called negative polarization or something, where you are driven more by your hatred of the other side, negative partisanship, than by any positive vision. Because you ask yourself, what is the core conflict? It's not slavery. It's not steelworkers being shot on strike. It's not a Great Depression. What is the core conflict? Is it because your daughter had to play against a trans goalie in soccer? Is it? I think it has something to do with status and with a sense of not being respected, and that sense of being disrespected has led to the Trump movement. That's what he played into, because he has it himself. He's a man full of grievances.
Well, Hillary Clinton, when she called 50% of America deplorable, was a reflection of actual condescension.
Yes.
I mean, it's not, they didn't imagine, I mean, the people in the small towns didn't imagine that people were looking down on them. People are looking down on them.
And 8 years earlier, Barack Obama, these only happen, by the way, at private fundraisers, because that's where these candidates actually say what they mean. And then it's
private fundraisers where waiters are taking secret videos.
Yeah. And then it gets out. But Barack Obama famously said that, they are clinging to guns and religion because they're bitter. Well, there was a little bit of truth to that.
You know how many Americans love guns and God?
It's not something someone who wants to be president of the whole country should say. But now the idea of being president of the whole country is absurd. Trump is punishing Democrats in states that didn't vote for him by withholding food stamps, by basically starving them. This is where we are in terms of the white hot hatred that is very hard to explain, but
So the
that
question
drives
is,
everything.
do Germans hate each other? The
Yeah,
way
do
Americans
Germans hate each other in the same way?
You're far from that. Oh, that's good to know.
We haven't come so far.
You got that going
Yeah,
for you.
We haven't come so far as you said, but I think you can find some elements with the AfD. The AfD, apart from any political single issue, is the self-understanding is we are the party, we are the holder of the truth, and what we are saying is the truth, and the others on the other side of the political spectrum, they don't tell you the truth.
So your newspaper is
We don't tell the truth.
you don't tell the truth.
No,
That's
not
what they
at all,
say.
of course.
Yeah.
And also, I think it's if it would be interesting to have a debate in the Bundestag where the leader of the AfD is asked, what are the sentences that of Chancellor Friedrich Merz you would join? You would say that he is right. It would be interesting to listen what she's saying. So, and the second thing parallel I would say is the AfD is the party of the people who don't feel respected.
Yep.
It's a terrible mistake that happened in America, which, I mean, to the extent that I have a dog in this fight, I would say would be a mistake in Germany. The mistake that you can make in Germany, or people in the big cities can make, is to start hating and feeling contempt for the rank and file voters of the AfD. I mean, that's what happened in America. And you know, sometimes that's hard because maybe AfD people are saying, I'm not talking about the leadership, but the rank and file are saying things that are egregious, terrible to you, but to respond with contempt doesn't actually help the situation. And maybe George is sitting there thinking, well, you know, at a certain point you have to defend your values and you have to fight them, but it's a tough situation. And literally, when Hillary Clinton was exposed saying that 50% of the country is deplorable, that was it. That was it. A lot of people wrote off the Democratic Party.
And I can tell you that year, 2016, I was doing a lot of reporting in the heartland. And when Trump won, a colleague got in my face and said, those were your people and you empowered them by making other people feel sorry for them. I thought I was just doing, I thought I was doing journalism, but
it wasn't me.
It was not Jeff. In fact, Jeff was nowhere near the scene of that crime.
I was nowhere near the scene of the crime.
And Jeff wouldn't have said it because he knows that part of our job is to try to understand what people think, even if we don't like it. In fact, especially if we don't like it. And too few journalists did that, and too much of the New York elite media looked down on them and thought of them as kind of zoo animals. And yeah, they were pissed. And they were pretty satisfied when they could rub it in our faces.
So now I'd like to ask you to speculate a bit about what are the things that might end this, or at least put us on a trajectory to a better place in our national history. There are lots of different scenarios out there. Perhaps the one that is hardest to believe in is that it will happen through the next election, and that won't somehow be interfered with, but that certainly would be a good way to go. There are others who say, well, maybe we need a crash, a real economic setback that would force people to reevaluate their beliefs. Would it be large and possibly violent demonstrations? There's a really disturbing poll out that shows that something like 30% of Americans think that it will take violence to put America back on the right track. We didn't invite you here to get you even more depressed, but nonetheless, I'm curious to see what you, George, and you, Jeff, think. Where's the off-ramp, if we can call it that?
I think it all depends on next year's election. Demonstrations can be a very powerful, mobilizing, inspiring force, but they don't lead to election victories. And right now, the Democratic Party is just a wreck. It is unpopular, divided, whiny, miserable, pointing fingers at each other. Democrats are great at being at complaining, and so I don't know if the party is capable of really bringing it to the opposition. But I also don't know if the powers are going to let us have a free and fair election. There are a lot of ways, short of locking up voters, to make sure the election goes Trump's way. There are a lot of office holders at the state and local level who will be responsible for the running of the election. There are a lot of courts that will be responsible for adjudicating disputes. The courts, the lower courts, have actually been about the last institutional defense of democracy in the country. They can create chaos. They can have ballot malfunctions. They can have people claiming they didn't get to. The 2020 was a run up. It was chaotic, and they now know how to do it a lot better, just as they've learned how to, cut a swath through the government a lot better. And I don't know how ready we are to deal with that, because again, these just aren't. Americans don't think, yeah, the election might not be free and fair. Very few people are thinking about that right now, but I think we all have to, because public opinion's the last barrier to an authoritarian regime.
So James Madison, one of the chief writer of the Federalist Papers and the Constitution, one of the great founders of America, very, very pessimistic about human nature. Wrote into the Constitution separation of powers to make sure that each branch checked the other's power, right, among other things. James Madison believed that American democracy, would not survive the rise of the daily newspaper. Delivering new information to voters, to citizens, once a day, he thought, would overwhelm them cognitively. It was too much information to process. They wouldn't have time to cool down and think rationally and reasonably. So I sometimes think about James Madison coming back today and going on Instagram and thinking like that, I'm saying that because I don't know that any of our democracies can survive not only social media, everyone talking to everyone all at once. I don't know if we can survive that in the long run. I think Donald Trump is a byproduct. I think populism is a byproduct today of some of these trends. And I don't, and we're about to do, social media is a 20-year-old experiment on our brains conducted by a small group of people living just south of San Francisco. We're about to do another experiment on not only on our brains, on our children's brains with AI. I look at Instagram now and TikTok now, and I can't tell what is fake reality and what is real reality. I think by next year, you're going to be flooded with so much fakery. It's going to be impossible to discern what is true and what is not. If we don't get a handle on this, if we don't deal with AI in a more mature way, in a more declarative way than we dealt with social media, I don't know if Thomas Jefferson. I think it was Jefferson who said that if men were angels, we'd have no need for government.
Actually, your man Madison.
Madison said it. I can't believe I just dismissed Madison like that. Jefferson said,
Jefferson said, if I had to choose between newspapers and democracy, I would choose newspapers and government. And government.
Right, he would choose newspapers, yes. Obviously. So would I. So I don't have. I'm not particularly hopeful at this moment because I don't think. I think technology is overwhelming us. I might be wrong. You know, I mean, Gutenberg 500 years ago invented the printing press, and we had 100 years of war after that. So, and then we came out for, we're doing okay here, So
We had
maybe,
the Enlightenment.
as George W. Bush said, in the long run, we're all dead.
That was Keynes.
What? It was Keynes. Yeah,
Keynes.
Bush was quoting Keynes.
Yeah.
But I don't know if we're going to be able to do this. The other point, and this is interesting in a Germany of immigration, we've never really had an experiment in the world of a large scale multi-ethnic democracy in which power is truly shared by different racial and ethnic groups. Right. America is the closest we've come to a successful experiment in that regard, but we're having trouble on that front. So there's a lot of things. On the other hand, nobody knows what's going to happen tomorrow, right? Nobody knows. I mean, things take odd turns, and humans are interesting creatures, and outside events. Outside events tend to be unexpected and then shape us in different ways. So I'm not, and certainly giving up is not a choice. So you just keep going. But there's some big things that we don't actually deal with.
We have some questions from the audience, and I want to get to those before our time runs out. The first batch of questions we have are from school students, and I want to go to those because they tend to be pretty interesting and straightforward and without guile. So, question number one, do you think Donald Trump will accept the end of his presidency?
I mean, Donald Trump is 79. Also, don't forget.
In the long run,
In the
something will happen.
I'm mixed on that. There are moments when Donald Trump says things that are normative, that are the things that politicians say. And he says, "Oh, it would be very unpopular if I ran for president a third time." You can't run for president a third time anyway. But I mean, he has said that. On the other hand, he doesn't believe in the rules, so it's possible. I mean, he's actually one of his rhetorical tricks to say, "Look, I would do X, but it's unpopular, so I won't do it." And that's sort of the balloon that he sends up. And he just said last week, "Well, I could run for vice president with JD Vance as president, and then Vance would quit, and I would become president, but that wouldn't be popular, and people wouldn't like that." So, he doesn't look. So talk about another the greatest thing the greatest American ever did, the greatest American being George Washington, the father of our country. The greatest thing he ever did was go home. He was president. We only understood monarchical behavior. We only understood the way monarchs and the people wanted him to stay as president forever. And he said, "You know what? I had a nice time. It has been great, but other people should do this. I'm going back to Mount Vernon." And it was the Cincinnatus moment of America. And he set the pattern for all presidents to follow, except FDR, who was going to keep going and going and going. But there was a war going on. And Donald Trump is the first president in American history who disrespects the model, the role model that George Washington played for the American people. So I don't know.
George?
I think whether or not he does, and I don't think he will. Whoever is the Republican, I don't think he's going to try to serve a third term. But the Republican nominee will be entirely beholden to him. He won't be able to go to the bathroom without Donald Trump saying, "Okay, now you can go," because it is a cult of personality. The Republican Party is a movement of one man, and JD Vance is smart. He reads, he has ideas, he has had a really interesting life. I've written about it, but he does not have the unbelievable showmanship and salesmanship and entertainment value that Trump has, let's not underestimate how much of this is just about people have kind of, some people
No,
have
the
just
thing,
found politics more fun. And Vance is kind of an angry, cutting guy. And
Vance is not likable. Donald Trump is very likable. I know that people in the audience probably are surprised by that. I've had direct exposure to Donald Trump over the years. He's charismatic. He's solicitous. He's a hotel guy. So he, do you want a Diet Coke? Can I get you anything? You go, what do you think of my office? What do you? I mean, he's a very personable guy. He's very funny. People find him very amusing. I find a lot of the speeches entertaining in a way that you don't have at other people. People forget all this. He's very good at this. He's a genius at getting large numbers of Americans to like him. Remember that he gets a tremendous percentage of the Hispanic vote.
Go figure.
Go. That doesn't rationally make sense, but it makes. But here it is.
So, do you think, for whoever wants to answer, that anyone could preserve the Trump coalition after Trump?
I mean, they did have this mock-up Trumpism for 4,000 years time cover, just like after the election. So they do have some illusion of grandeur on that term. And I do think that there's enough personnel and ideology and strategic planning to keep going. And then what about that project third term? How valid is that? I mean, it has a logo, it has an organization, it has supposedly money.
I guess the question I ask is, what is the ism that holds this coalition together? What is the overarching idea? There isn't one. There's a lot of impulses. Most of them are negative, as I was saying. There's a showman in charge. There's an undercurrent of unhappiness and even nihilism. But what is the vision of America that MAGA is proposing and that a critical mass of Americans will continue to support decade after decade, the way they supported New Deal liberalism for a long time, and then they supported Reaganite conservatism for a long time. These had policy and philosophical content. And yes, there's tariffs. Yes, there's bring back manufacturing. It's not going to happen. It it's a kind of nationalism, but even that to me is thin stuff for people to just continue to overcome, because coalitions require people to overcome differences. So there's Silicon Valley, there's the populists. In many ways, they should hate each other.
But I would say this though, that the Republicans have seized broad. This is more broad than Donald Trump. They seem like they seem like more normal people than Democratic elites. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people about this, and if Democrats were simply stood for eating red meat, gasoline powered cars, heterosexuality, church, no men and women's sports, all of these things that large majorities of Americans actually agree in. Like people like going to barbecues and driving their pickup trucks to barbecues. The Democrats are seen as overthinky, feminized, overly feminized, scolding, contemptuous people. So the Republicans, and this is one of the reasons that 65 million Hispanics in America now. One of the reasons Hispanics are drawn to the Republican Party is that in their understanding, the Republicans stand for free enterprise. Many Hispanics are entrepreneurs, small to big. God, they go to church. Therefore, they have more traditional values, and the Democrats don't speak to a lot of that. So it could go further than Trump. Trump is a completely unique figure. And he is the thing that binds it together right now. But his coalition stands for things that many, many Americans think of as common sense.
I think if a Democrat emerged who could say, without condescension, without coming down from on high, we're a decent people, we're better than this, What about our common humanity? What about what makes us all American? It would hit a nerve. Now, it might not create the juggernaut you need to go up against the Trump juggernaut, but I don't think we're so far gone that there's no longer any resonance in appealing to that chord.
Look, what I'm saying analytically. I'm not endorsing or denying one thing. I'm just saying that the Democrats seem, to large numbers of Americans, out of touch with normal values and behaviors.
Yeah,
And
I agree.
So I hear that a lot, and I don't disagree with it, but I wonder if there isn't also just a charisma gap at the moment, that the Democrats haven't got too many politicians who are actually drawing any interest, and that Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries may be great policy guys, but you don't leave the TV on when you see them at the podium. And this has been one argument for why the Democrats have been faring poorly. And Kamala was also, a case in point. She just wasn't an exciting candidate.
And that lack of charisma comes from being afraid to speak directly, to say something people know is true, but that might ruffle some feathers. No, it's all poll tested. It's all consultant driven. That was Kamala Harris's campaign. That is how Democrats run for office. It seems inauthentic. And if we know anything, it's that people kind of want to know you're not bullshitting them.
So let's get to one more question from the audience, and that is, can the U.S. improve its election system so as to come up with better outcomes?
I mean, many people have tried that.
Yes, that's good.
To give the question,
I appreciate where it's.
there's this thing, the Electoral College, which is deeply undemocratic. And of course, we're watching the gerrymandering nightmare go on. Would you put the chances of a constitutional amendment above 1 in 100?
No, it's not even worth talking about, because these things are never going to happen. You're never going to dissolve the Senate. A state with 600,000 people, Wyoming, has the same number of representatives as a state with 40 million people, California.
Same number of senators, yes.
Same number of senators. It's never going to change. Never going to get rid of the Electoral College. It's not even worth talking about.
There is a lot of talk among progressives about rewriting the Constitution to make it more democratic, because, yeah, it is in many ways an anti-democratic document. The Electoral College, the Senate. It was all about getting enough votes in 1787 to make it happen, and they barely did. It's a losing game. It's not going to happen. You might not like what comes out of a new constitutional convention if you're on the left. It might be Steve Bannon's dream. Instead, Democrats have to face the fact that a lot of Americans don't like them, feel alienated from them, feel that they don't represent them, don't speak their language. And there are these vast tracts of the country. If you look at the map, it's just red. Of course, these are less populated areas, but still, states that 10 years ago Democrats could compete in are off limits now. How did that happen? Well, it must be partly the Democrats' fault. And they need to figure out how to be competitive, even if they don't like the Electoral College and the Senate, how to be competitive in Ohio. Why did Sherrod Brown, this great working man's champion, lose to a car dealer who had had a series of lawsuits for wage theft? And yet Sherrod Brown lost. Why? Because of the D next to his name. That's all. Yeah. They have to change what that D means in Ohio and a lot of other places. And that takes organizing on the ground, being there year round, not just when there's an election, charisma, and rebuilding the party from the ground up. It's a really long, maybe generations long.
Sure. Could I ask our SZ colleagues?
You're allowed to.
I know. I'm getting permission from the chair.
Yeah.
No. I don't. I think I might understand a little bit of this, but I don't truly understand why German political and intellectual leaders don't say to Americans, not to American leadership, but to Americans more forcefully, we have some direct experience within living memory of at least a few people left of what happens when you let democratic processes decay. Let me tell you what happened and why, and maybe you'll learn something from it. You brought this up, and I just was really been thinking about it a lot. There's something that we can learn from German history, and it doesn't seem to be Germans transmitting that in that direction across the ocean.
I think it's there's a great uncertainty how to behave to somebody like Donald Trump, and there's also, I think, some kind of, you mentioned that before, of cowardness. And when you see how, for example, how all the European leaders tried to move Trump after he had thrown Zelensky out of office, to return that. And when he had when Zelensky was invited, and 10, 12, 15 European leaders, they jumped into the airplanes and flew to DC. And for me, it was the picture of an old man who was sitting in an institution where he was cared of, for old people, caring all the people around him about the health of this guy. And they were sitting on the table, and everybody said, "Donald, you're great, such a great guy. Don't forget that we admire you. We admire all of us, admire you." And I couldn't believe this kind of behavior. I think it's, or if you look at the tariff with the Europeans agreed on with Donald Trump with the 25%. I think nobody has the courage to stand up and say, "Hey, Donald, we had made experience to your questions in the history of our continent, and we can tell you, you don't have to do it in a public way." But I think they are afraid of him because he's in some way he's untouchable, and that's the reason why nobody dares to say something to him that might be critical.
Yeah.
Also, there's still a taboo about comparing our experience in such a direct way, and there's a shyness about like bringing that comparison to the table. And also, there's certain aspects of what's happening now that are very, very new and brand new, be it the digital amplification, or be it that lack of isms, and be the lack of coherence and working merely on instinct and trespassing and entertainment mainly. So there's a shyness and a kind of an insecurity, but maybe it's time for a transatlantic dialogue that puts that on the table.
Well, I'm afraid we've kind of reached the end of our time. I think the only viable proposal is that as Jeff Goldberg's friends get citizenship in Germany, lots of Germans need to get citizenship in Nebraska. And we'll even things out that away. But I really want to thank you for your attention. As I said, this has been a great conversation, and we will be having more, and they will be available online. Those which, for whatever reason, we're doing in Berlin. There will be a number more events, and you'll get to hear these two very intelligent gentlemen, as well as several others of their colleagues who are coming over for the second leg of the trip. I really want to thank Munich, want to thank our audience, want to thank the Residence Theater. It's been a great evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.